to talk about something I feel a little oogie talking about because it seems personal. But it turns out the reason I'm going to do it, the reason I feel okay about it actually, is that it's explicitly not personal in the end. It's about the country, it's about policy, it's about the health of literally tens of millions of Americans. It does start in a kind of personal place. So again, slight oog factor here, but work with me. Here it is. We have had on this show many times before former FDA Commissioner Dr. David Kessler. He's a big deal. He has served multiple presidents, Democrat and Republican. As I said, former commissioner of the FDA. He was most recently a very senior science advisor to President Biden. David Kessler has been the dean of the medical school at Yale and at UC San Francisco. David Kessler, as I say, a very big deal. And as a medical doctor, Dr. Kessler recently looked at the report from President Trump's own annual physical last month. And to him, that report told a story, a good news story, that he thought more Americans should know about. This is from a piece that Dr. Kessler wrote for The Atlantic. It has just published in the past few minutes. He says, quote, during his first term, a scan showed signs of plaque buildup in President Trump's coronary arteries, which put him at risk of a heart attack. In 2020, his BMI, his body mass index, was just over the threshold for obesity. That combination would have made him a candidate for a GLP-1 drug, that is a weight loss drug like Ozempic or Wegovy. Quote, and indeed, throughout his 2024 campaign, people speculated that he was taking one. Then, last month, Trump's latest physical showed that he had dropped 20 pounds, which moved him from obese to overweight. Trump has never publicly said he is on a GLP-1, and when reached for comment, the White House did not address questions about how the president lost the weight. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump is, quote, in peak physical and mental condition. I'll tell you, we also reached out to the White House for comment. We got that exact same response about what a brilliant specimen of man he is. But Dr. Kessler goes on to say this, quote, the most revealing aspect of the president's medical report was the list of drugs he is taking, which includes a combination that amounts to what doctors call intensive lipid-lowering therapy, a treatment usually reserved for patients who are at significant risk of cardiac disease. That drug regimen seems to be working. His LDL, the bad cholesterol, has dropped dramatically in recent years. So what Dr. David Kessler says he sees in President Trump's medical report is a success story. Success against conditions that tens of millions of Americans struggle with, namely obesity and cardiac disease. And that success, that progress in the president's own health report appears to be largely thanks to medical science. The president is on these two cholesterol-lowering drugs, this intensive lipid-lowering therapy for people at risk of cardiac disease. That treatment really appears to be working for him. We do not know if the president's documented weight loss is thanks to Ozempic or Wegovy or any similar drug. Certainly no shame if it is. Any such drug is not listed in his medical report. The White House will not say one way or the other when they are asked. And I know I said this was a little oogie to talk about because this feels personal, but the point of this is not necessarily the president's personal health. The point here is that the president of the United States appears to be improving his own health through access to great medical care and great medical science. That's what he gets. Simultaneously, his administration is doing so much to hurt regular Americans' opportunity to achieve those same good health outcomes the same way. The National Institutes of Health, the government research agency that produces much of the science for these specific drugs and countless others, Trump has slashed its budget and nearly $2 billion in research grants there have been canceled. The FDA shepherds drugs to market and makes sure they are safe. The FDA is reeling from huge staffing cuts, and the staff that is there can't complete basic tasks because, among other things, their government credit cards have been frozen. Trump and his allies in Congress are currently debating how many hundreds of billions of dollars they're going to cut from Medicaid, which provides health insurance to tens of millions of Americans. And as for those GLP-1 weight loss drugs that can be a lifesaver for so many people, well, Trump has rescinded a Biden administration proposal to have those drugs covered by Medicare. even as the White House says, maybe weight loss drugs will get a big price cut. They'll solve it with deals, if you want to believe that. But they're undoing the plan to have them covered by Medicare, which puts at risk the opportunity for tens of millions of Americans to benefit from those kinds of drugs. President Trump is personally benefiting in his own health from the scientific and medical infrastructure the U.S. government has built up over decades. He is simultaneously in the process of destroying that infrastructure for everyone else. Joining us now is former FDA Commissioner Dr. David Kessler. He has a new book that is coming out tomorrow. It's called Diet, Drugs, and Dopamine, the New Science of Achieving a Healthy Weight. Dr. David Kessler, congratulations on the book. First of all, let me say, I brought home the galley when I last saw you. I read it. My partner read it. We then handed it to a neighbor who also wanted to read it. I really appreciate you writing this, particularly given your expertise in this field and so many others. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
So first, let me just ask you if I accurately represented your take on the president's medical report and why you think it's worth understanding in terms of how he is governing, how he is managing health policy in the country.
You know, weight is such a fraught subject. There's so much stigma attached to it, but it's not about weight. It's really about health. You got the facts exactly right. Let's just go through them. The president had a cardiac scan that showed some plaque buildup, and they put him on 2 lipid-lowering drugs. What no one has said about those 2 lipid-lowering drugs is what those are called is intensive lipid-lowering therapy. Ezetimibe, rosuvastatin, and they're working. His lipids dropped dramatically from 143 to 51. I mean, that reduces the risk of heart attack, that prolongs life. But the key, as you said, is the science of those drugs was worked out by research funded by the NIH and shepherded by the FDA. The president is destroying those institutions that gave birth to the drugs that are benefiting him.
I think we tend to think of drug development as the province of private companies, of pharmaceutical companies. Can you explain to an audience that may not understand the sort of weight of what you just said? Can you talk about the federal government's role in researching and creating drugs and getting them to the American people, the part of it that can't happen without the U.S. government?
So a drug has to work on a certain target. And while the drug companies will chemically synthesize the drug and do the clinical trials, the identification of that target, the receptor, I mean, that was done by research funded. It was Nobel Prize winning work by Brown and Goldstein, right? They identified, you know, through NIH funding, because no drug company has that capability. They identified the receptors that the drugs can work on. It was also true for the current weight loss drugs. The GLP-1 drugs were done by, you know, a number of research labs, including, you know, a great research lab up at Harvard at Mass General Hospital.
When you were last here, Dr. Kessler, you said something that got a very large response from our audience. People continue to ask me about it. You talked about when President Trump himself had COVID during his first term, and he was very ill. We learned later just how seriously ill he was. And you talked about his treatment, a very successful treatment at Walter Reed when he received monoclonal antibody infusions. And you sort of broke the news on our show that the doctor who made it possible for Trump to get that treatment, which very well could have saved his life, is one of the officials at FDA, one of the officials in the federal government who Trump had fired. And it seems like it's following the sort of same lines that you're describing here today. Something which he's benefiting from, which may have indeed saved his life, is something that he's cutting off in terms of the ability for that expertise to continue to benefit not just himself but the American people. I feel like I'm seeing continuities between those two stories, but I wanted to ask you if you see it that way.
I think you got it exactly. I was told this weekend that there's 600-700 recusals today at FDA. That means recusals, you have to submit those when you're looking for jobs. So there is an exodus. That kind of expertise, those nights that I was on with you when we were facing COVID, we got through those because I was able to rely, when I was co-leading Operation Warp Speed, on a great deal of expertise. And the Trump administration is going to need to rely on those expertise. They just haven't figured that out yet. There are going to be moments where they're going to turn around and find no one is there with that kind of expertise, and that should concern all of us.
Dr. David Kessler, former FDA commissioner and so much else, a long record of service in our government at the highest levels of our health infrastructure. Dr. Kessler's new book is out tomorrow. It's called Diet, Drugs, and Dopamine, The New Science of Achieving a Healthy Weight. Dr. Kessler, as always, it's an honor to have you here whenever you can be here. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.